Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Michael Cox, and I am your worship associate for our virtual service today, alongside our minister, Zachary Vincent. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Squamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time now or later in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of how and who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. I've always tried to look at both sides of issues and really tried to understand why people think how they think. For example, while I fully support a woman's right to choose, I can understand why some people are against abortion. Or while I understand why some people are arguing to defund or abolish police departments, I think we need to reform policing to better serve our communities, not abolish them. One issue that I feel very strongly about, and for the life of me, cannot understand some people's reasoning, is why they are opposed to the idea of who you love is your business. To me, love is love, no caveats, period. I can't imagine Jesus, Abraham, Muhammad, or Buddha would say love is love only under certain circumstances. Of course, like all issues, our opinions are shaped by our experience. As many of you knew, I grew up in Walla Walla. I graduated from high school in 1975. At the time, there were no people that I was aware of that had come out, and for good reason. Sad to say, but if someone had come out, they would have opened themselves to harassment or possible physical harm. I remember coming home my junior year in college and going out for a beer with a good friend from high school. I asked him how his love life was. He paused and said, "I'm in love, Mike." And I said, not thinking, well, what is her name? He paused again and said, Greg. It was my time to pause, and I looked at him and said, congratulations. He proceeded to tell me how wonderful Greg was and what joy Greg gave him. I asked if he had told anyone, and he said no. He thought his family and friends would just not understand. I thought how sad that he had to conceal this joyous moment from his family and friends because he did not feel comfortable telling the world he was in love and how wonderful it felt. Soon after graduation from college, I joined the Peace Corps. Sadly, the country we were going to serve in, Malawi, was vehemently homophobic. In fact, it was a crime that for Malawians was punishable with prison and for foreigners, deportation. In the Peace Corps, I was a teacher. I became friends with one of my students, which was frowned upon, but The differences between our age was really only a couple years. Several months before I was to leave, he asked if we could talk. He came to my house and he started to ask questions about life in the U.S. and specifically about homosexuals. He eventually told me that he was gay, but for obvious reasons, he could not tell anybody. He literally feared for his life. He desperately wanted to get out, and fortunately, he did. He got a scholarship to go to college in the UK and lives there today with his lifelong partner. I still do not understand people's opposition to what I consider a fundamental human right. Love is love, no caveats, period. Dedicate the lighting of our chalice to the hope that we can continue to make progress in this country and the globe in making it okay to love who and how you want.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat each other kindly as we are all one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we can all become the best that we can be.
As Unitarian Universalists, we oftentimes forget that not every religious tradition is as LGBTQ affirming as we are, or at least as we strive to be. And since June is Pride Month, LGBTQ Pride Month, this service we're going to be exploring what it means to be an ally, what it means to create safe space, what it means to be in community as straight and gay and lesbian and trans folks together. And so with that, I want to invite us into this time of worship with these words by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Julie Corbett-Hamer. In the face of hate, we answer the call of love. In the face of exclusion, we answer the call of inclusion. In the face of homophobia, we answer the call of LGBTQ rights. In the face of racism, we answer the call of justice for all races. In the face of xenophobia, we answer the call of pluralism. In the face of misogyny, we answer the call of women's rights. In the face of demagoguery, we answer the call of reason. In the face of religious intolerance, we answer the call of diversity. In the face of narrow nationalism, we answer the call of global community. In the face of bigotry, we answer the call of open-mindedness. In the face of despair, we answer the call of hope. As Unitarian Universalists, we answer the call of love, now more than ever. Come, let us worship together.
We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment.
I want to tell you a story today in honor of Pride Month. All of June celebrates the LGBTQ plus movement and their efforts for equality in American society. So I want to tell you one particular story about where the most famous symbol for gay rights and gay pride came from. This is a story that starts in 1951 in a tiny town in Kansas. And that's where a young man named Gilbert Baker was born and lived. Gilbert did not like Kansas. People were not very nice to Gilbert in Kansas. He felt really bullied. And so he wanted to get away from Kansas as soon as he possibly could. Gilbert was drafted in the early 1970s to serve in the Vietnam War. And once he was drafted, Gilbert volunteered to be a medic for the Army. And for some reason, the Army sent him as a medic to San Francisco, where Gilbert finally felt like he belonged. It felt like he fit in. And so after he was honorably discharged from the Army, Gilbert stayed. He stayed in San Francisco, and he got involved in all kinds of activism. And you know what Gilbert did mostly for his activism? He made things, because Gilbert loved to sew. So he made banners and he designed all kinds of different things to help spread the word about gay rights and gay pride. And then in 1978, one of Gilbert's friends, a man named Harvey Milk, decided, you know what? Our movement needs a symbol. If we're really going to take it to the next level, we need a symbol so that everyone can see the symbol and know this is a symbol of gay pride. And he turned to his friend Gilbert and he said, can you design a symbol for us? Gilbert thought, absolutely, I can do that. And Gilbert thought back to 2 years before, 1976. Now, if any of you were alive in 1976, you'll remember that it was the bicentennial of the United States. And there were American flags everywhere, everywhere. And Gilbert thought, that's what we need. We don't need a symbol, we need a flag that represents gay pride. And so he went back to his studio and he went back to his sewing machine and he whipped up an 8-striped flag for the 1978 Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco. And it was immediately enormously popular, super popular. And one of the most brilliant, amazing things that Gilbert did was he didn't decide that he needed credit for it, that it could only be made by him. Anyone, he said, can make the flag. Anyone, at any time. There's no copyright on the pride flag that he made. The rainbow flag, he said, should belong to everyone. And that meant really quickly it became very, very, very popular. And so a company that Gilbert worked for, the Paramount Flag Company, started to make lots and lots of flags for people to buy. Now you might know that today the flag doesn't have 8 stripes, it has 6 stripes. And that is in part because the pink stripe, that was a hot pink stripe at the top, and that fabric turned out to be very hard to get. And so, no more pink stripe. And then 7 stripes is a little odd. The flag doesn't hang very well with 7, and so there were 2 different colors of blue, and those got merged. And today we have a 6-striped pride flag that you can see everywhere. And each stripe stands for something. And I want to tell you what each one stands for. The red stripe is for life. The orange stripe is for healing. The yellow stripe for sunlight. The green stripe for nature. The blue stripe for serenity. And the purple stripe for spirit. Maybe you can see why the pride flag is so popular among UUs. Each one of those things is a part of our spiritual and faith heritage. The flag continued to spread all around the world, and in 1994, Gilbert moved from San Francisco to New York. And in New York, he designed a mile-long pride flag for the 25th anniversary parade for the anniversary of Stonewall. So the flag stretched for a mile down the streets in New York City. And that became another popular way to show the flag. So after Pride Parade after Pride Parade, it would have really long flags floating in the street. And then in 2015, maybe the most famous symbol of the flag showed up on the White House in lights after the passage of marriage equality for gay and lesbian people. So the flag is everywhere, and that symbol that Gilbert Baker came up with is all over the world as a sign of pride and equality and inclusion. And it's been changed a lot. So somewhere in the 2000s, BIPOC people added a black and a brown stripe for diversity and inclusion. And later on, the flag was again adapted to add the trans flag with the light blue and the light pink and the white stripe symbolizing trans pride. And so, as you go forth this month in June, look for flags. Count them. How many rainbow flags will you see in the next few weeks? And anytime you see them, send up a thanks to Gilbert Baker and his sewing abilities. And that is my story.
Let us take a deep breath together, breathing in and out. Continue to breathe deeply, relaxing, letting your body take in the oxygen that we need to sustain us. Breathe in the silence of this moment. the peace that is available to us. Let your mind, your body, your spirit settle, putting aside all distractions and worries. Like the surface of a pond begins to still, let yourself be still in this moment. Breathe in deep, breathing in the healing force of life, the life-giving force that animates us. Breathing in and out. In this moment, let us feel that sense of acceptance, that sense of belonging that we all hope for. Let us be filled with hope, with patience, with love and kindness for ourselves and for each other. In the stillness of this time together, may these qualities and feelings fill us to the brim and emanate out, helping to transform us and the world around us. May this be our prayer and our spiritual practice, both this day and in the days ahead. Amen. Starting in the late 1940s, there was a steady rise of anti-queer sentiment in the United States. Part of the cause of this rise was something known as the Lavender Scare, a phenomena caused by the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC. This committee was charged with rooting out communist sympathizers and identified queer folks as such because of their subversion of social norms. Eventually, in 1953, this line of thinking caused President Dwight D. Eisenhower to sign Executive Order 10450. This order set new security standards for employment in the federal government, and as a result, barred gay and lesbian folks from working in such roles. Following this executive order, many state and local governments put similar measures in place. Soon, millions of Americans were forced to sign oaths attesting to their sexual purity in order to maintain their employment. Not everyone could sign these oaths, however. Thousands had already been outed and lost their government jobs. Still others tried to object and found the contents of their personal life put on public display and their reputations disparaged. These events pushed many LGBTQ folks, people who were already in hiding, deeper into the closet. Despite this, members of these groups still tried to find places where they could create community and be together. And as a result, nightclubs and bars and other social settings began to come into being. These hidden spaces were safe spaces where queer people could come and be together, where a man could come and dance with another man and hold his hand openly, where people of alternative gender expressions could come and be themselves. They were places where a woman could bring another woman on a date and feel safe and secure. Soon, however, these few safe spaces that managed to be carved out came under siege. Bars and nightclubs were raided and the patrons who gathered there were arrested. The pressure and persecution built until one night on June 28, 1969, in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Manhattan. People had enough. Police raided a bar known as the Stonewall Inn, and when the cops came and became violent, the crowd turned against them. All the details of what happened that night aren't known and will probably never be known given the way the eyewitness accounts work. But according to some, Marsha P. Johnson, a black self-identified drag queen and gay activist, is often cited as the leader among a group of 3 antagonists known as the Vanguard. These individuals are cited with causing an uprising that led to the event known as the Stonewall Riot. The story goes that when faced with police in riot gear, Marsha took a brick, or as some would say, a shot glass, and threw it into the crowd of officers. So this act is something that Marsha themselves has often denied, saying they didn't arrive on the scene of the events until 2 a.m., long after the demonstration was already underway. Whatever caused the events that night, the reality is that members of the LGBTQ community had enough of the police. They took to the streets, and over the days and weeks that followed, demonstrations unfolded throughout New York and other cities around the country. On the Library of Congress's website, there's footage of some of these demonstrations. Footage of pro-LGBTQ demonstrators, or homophiles, as they were then called, taking to the streets. With signs and slogans, they outed themselves and demanded fair treatment. Many of these demonstrations were met with counter-protesters. In the footage, you can see images of people holding signs that read Sodom and Gomorrah in reference to the protesters while waving American flags. These anti-gay, antagonistic gestures did little to deter the demonstrators, though. People still gathered in support, chanting, "Gay power," and out of the closets and into the streets as they encouraged others to leave their homes and join in support. This moment of disclosure provides a powerful antidote to a situation one demonstrator spoke about in an interview. He said, "Having to lie, I feel, is one of the saddest and ugliest parts of being a homosexual. When you have your first bad love experience, for instance, you can't go to your brother or your sister and say, 'I'm hurting.'" The disclosure expressed by those who took to the streets at Stonewall had an empowering effect for many who participated. For perhaps the first time, people who had been shamed into hiding were claiming their place in the world by demanding fair treatment, demanding to be seen and not just hidden away somewhere. What happened at Stonewall was not the beginning of the LGBTQ movement. There had been organizations dedicated to fostering queer community for at least a century prior to this. But what happened at Stonewall represented a significant turning point. After the events of June 28, 1969, the Gay Liberation Front was formed and became a public voice for advocating for queer rights. For the first time, the work of queer community organizing was taking place in the public eye. It wasn't being hidden away behind closed doors, but was happening in view of everyone. It's perhaps no coincidence that on September 5th of that same year, James Stoll became the first openly gay man to be ordained as a minister in North America. Coincidentally, James was a Unitarian Universalist. It would take almost 20 years after James's ordination, however, for the first trans person to be granted this same privilege of ordination in 1988. I think it can be easy at times to forget some of this history. I'll be honest that I oftentimes don't remember it or forget it. I forget there was a time not so long ago when someone like me, an openly gay married man, would be persecuted for who I love. We are not that far removed from this history. 1969 wasn't that long ago. Coming out as queer can still be a hard thing. And not every family or friend group that people are part of is always affirming of these identities. Nor is every queer space welcoming to everyone. In recent years, many of the gay pride celebrations that have taken place in the month of June around our country have begun to be criticized by people of color. Many people of color within the LGBTQ community have raised the point that many of these celebrations center the presence of gay white men rather than reflecting the full diversity of the whole queer community. Beyond this, trans folks continue to be left out of the conversation of Pride Month, finding that there's no room for them in the parades or mainstream festivals that take place in cities. As acceptance of gay and lesbian relationships has grown, Discrimination and violence against transgender people in our country and around the world has also grown. I think it's important that we remember what brought this sense of recognition, this sense of acceptance for gay and lesbian people was the united front presented by queer people at Stonewall. A united front that helped advance the rights for many of the gay and lesbian folks like myself who enjoy the benefits of marriage today. It's because of the people who came before us, the people who gathered together despite their diverse and divergent backgrounds and demanded change, that change happened. I think that's why when we learn about the challenges and exclusions that are still faced by trans people today, that at least for me, I feel an obligation to do something. I feel an obligation to do something. This is what being an ally is about, after all. It's about joining in the struggle and recognizing that our liberation is bound together. That one of us isn't free as long as we all aren't free. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to affirm this connection as well as the worth and dignity of every person. When we look the other way because the problem that is presenting itself doesn't impact us, we're turning our back on our values. What happens to one of us impacts us all. And there are a lot of things that are happening in our country right now that are impacting trans folks detrimentally. Recently, the state of Arkansas passed a piece of legislation that bans access to gender-affirming healthcare treatment for minors. This includes hormonal treatments aimed at preventing puberty from happening until the person is of an age they can make a decision, or helping people who have made a decision to be able to express their gender identity biologically as they feel called to. Or thinking about the anti-bathroom bill that Tennessee passed that requires businesses who allow transgender people to use the bathroom of their choice to have to post a sign out front letting the public know that this is happening. And many other states are considering adopting similar pieces of legislation at this moment. Noticing this, I see an opportunity for the rest of the queer community, as well as our straight allies, to come together. This is a time for us to be present and to be present to each other and present a united front like there was at Stonewall, working to shift the paradigm. This June, for Pride Month, I hope we can reflect on who is being centered in the conversation and who is being left out. When we start to notice these dynamics and take the steps necessary to counter them, then I believe that real change can happen. Even actions that seem small, using pronouns when introducing ourselves, reading about the experience of trans and non-binary people, and learning about the broad spectrum of human gender, all contribute to greater acceptance. They may seem small, but they are a move in the direction that we are hoping for, a move in further acceptance toward liberation and freedom. Doing these things can go a long way in creating an environment where people can be seen and feel they can finally come out as who they truly are. I hope that we can be that sort of community where people feel safe enough to express themselves in the fullness of who they truly are, and in doing so, feel accepted to the glory of life.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abound, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our God. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we care in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May we go forth with the courage to live into who we authentically are, and the strength to accept each other as we are as well. May it be so.